an old suitcase, a growl in the morning fog, and a decision that changed everything. No one noticed it at first, just another forgotten thing on a cold concrete bench. But Cooper did. A retired K-9 with a soldier's heart and a scent for danger, he froze, growled, and refused to move. Inside, not drugs, not bombs, but a newborn, wrapped in rags, silent, shaking, abandoned like a ghost. A young rookie cop, still learning when to follow orders and when to follow instinct, stood on the edge of a choice that would haunt or heal, and what he did next saved 2 lives. But the story didn't end there, because somewhere out there, a mother was still screaming without a voice, and a monster was still hunting what he called his. What happened next will leave you breathless, and maybe restore your faith in love, in justice, and in the quiet heroism of a dog who never stopped protecting. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story like this again. Clearwater, Oregon. A town where time moved a little slower and the mist clung to the streets like ghosts reluctant to leave. It was early October, the kind of morning where breath turned to fog and the air carried the scent of pine, rust, and old rain. The sun hadn't fully broken through the clouds, and a low, stubborn haze blanketed the transit station at the edge of town. The old train yard behind it had long since gone quiet, but the bus station still saw traffic, Greyhound passengers, drifters, locals commuting in silence. Finn Parker, 25, stood beside his patrol SUV parked along the curb of the station's main entrance. He was tall and lean, with short sandy brown hair that curled slightly when damp, as it was now. His face still held the openness of youth, but his eyes had learned too quickly to carry weight. A recent graduate of the State Police Academy, Finn had transferred to Clearwater only 6 months ago, seeking peace, he had said, after a car chase in Portland ended with his partner injured. He still carried that guilt in the slope of his shoulders and the way he gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Beside him stood Cooper, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a storm gray coat flecked with lighter silver around his jaw and eyebrows. Cooper had served 3 tours with the military K-9 unit overseas before being retired after an IED explosion left shrapnel scars along his flank. He moved with purpose but a subtle limp, and his eyes, amber, alert, seemed to track the wind as much as sound. Finn didn't need a leash with Cooper. Their bond was silent, forged through long nights of shared watchfulness and the unspoken trust of survivors. The station was quiet, save for the occasional rumble of passing trucks on Highway 7 and the soft clinking of metal chairs as a janitor swept near the vending machines. Most of the early commuters had boarded already. Finn took a sip of his lukewarm gas station coffee and scanned the plaza, eyes settling briefly on a bent figure near the entrance kiosk. Martha Bell had been selling newspapers and stale donuts from the same little booth for over 20 years. In her mid-70s, Martha was small and wiry, with white curls always tucked under a knitted green cap. Her clothes smelled like cinnamon and ink, and her voice carried a permanent rasp from years of smoking. She nodded at Finn with a familiar grunt. "Quiet morning," Finn said. Martha shrugged, then leaned forward. "You know, kid, I saw someone strange the other night." Finn raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" "Girl. Couldn't have been more than 25. Pregnant. Scared-looking. Kept circling the benches out front. No luggage, no ID, like she was waiting for someone who never came." Martha blew warm air into her mittens. "That was 3 nights ago." Finn frowned, making a mental note. "You reported?" She scoffed. "To who? They don't send the cavalry for ghosts, sweetheart." Cooper suddenly stiffened. The shift was almost imperceptible. His ears twitched, head tilted low, body locked like a spring. Then the growl came. Deep. Warning. Finn turned instantly, following Cooper's fixed gaze toward one of the wooden benches at the far end of the platform. It sat beneath a flickering street lamp, half sunk in shadow, and beside it, resting like any other forgotten item, was a large, battered suitcase. The suitcase was old, hard-sided, maroon with peeling edges and a busted wheel. No tags, no markings, and, most importantly, no one nearby claimed it. Cooper lunged forward. Finn followed, instincts kicking in. The dog's nose hovered inches from the case, his tail rigid. Then he began to scratch, not with aggression, but with urgency. Left paw, right paw, back and forth, not his usual motion for narcotics or bombs. This was frantic, almost. Desperate. Finn's heartbeat quickened. He radioed in to dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a suspicious item at Clearwater Station, possibly a threat, requesting backup and bomb unit." As he waited, he crouched beside Cooper, whispering, "What is it, buddy? What are you telling me?" That's when he heard it. So faint he thought at first it was the wind. Then again. A muffled sound. No. A whimper. High-pitched. Human. Finn's blood went cold. He stepped closer and pressed his ear to the case. There it was, an unmistakable cry, soft and strained. An infant. He looked around. No one else was within 10 feet. He didn't have time to wait for protocol. Not this time. Not when someone was dying inside that case. He drew in a breath, unclipped the latches, and slowly unzipped the lid. The smell hit him first, sour, unwashed cloth, faint traces of urine. Then the sight. A newborn boy, no more than 2 weeks old, wrapped in an old flannel blanket with faded teddy bears. His face was flushed and damp, his lips trembling from cold. His tiny fists were clenched. One sock missing. But he was alive. "Jesus," Finn breathed, scooping the baby into his arms. The child's eyes opened, gray-blue, unfocused, but he did not cry again. Just nestled into Finn's jacket, drawing warmth. Cooper leaned in and gently licked the baby's fingers. Finn fumbled for his radio again. "Unit 4, confirm. I found a live infant. Repeat. Live infant abandoned in suitcase. Request immediate EMS response." Behind him, Martha's eyes widened as she stepped from her booth, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Finn didn't answer. His whole world had narrowed to the weight of the child in his arms, the protective stance of his dog, and the growing suspicion that someone had left this baby here to die. But Cooper had stopped that story from ending. The wind picked up, pulling strands of mist along the ground like ghosts parting way. And somewhere, not far from the station, the person who left the child behind was still out there. The emergency room at Clearwater Regional Hospital buzzed with the soft urgency of a quiet crisis. The morning fog still clung to the glass windows as if reluctant to let the town breathe clearly. Nurse practitioners moved briskly through the hallway, voices hushed, hands steady, navigating the space between panic and procedure. The building, built in the 1980s with pale walls and chipped tiles, held the smell of antiseptic, old paper, and something faintly floral, a tired attempt to mask the sharpness of urgency. Finn Parker sat in the corner of the pediatric ER waiting room, his uniform jacket draped over one knee, still damp from the morning mist. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and his knee bounced with restrained energy. Cooper lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes trained on the double doors beyond which the infant had disappeared minutes ago. Cooper's ears flicked every time a nurse passed, and once he rose halfway, nose tilted toward a passing gurney, but it wasn't their baby. Dr. Lena Price emerged moments later, a woman in her late 40s with crow's feet that deepened when she smiled. But today, her face was taut and unreadable. She wore her sandy brown hair tied in a low ponytail, her pale green scrubs slightly rumpled. She had the calm, measured gait of someone used to standing between disaster and repair. Her voice, however, held no coldness, only tired compassion. "You did the right thing," she said softly as she approached. "He's alive, cold, slightly dehydrated. A little jaundiced, but otherwise healthy. No bruising or fractures. Whoever left him didn't harm him directly. Finn nodded but didn't speak. His eyes lingered on the hallway behind her. Dr. Price continued, "We're keeping him for 48-hour observation. Pediatric ICU, but more precaution than emergency. The baby's maybe 2 weeks old. Cord stump is nearly healed." "Any idea who he is?" Finn asked, his voice low. "No tags, no medical bracelet, no microchip, no record in our system or the National Birth Registry. So for now, he doesn't exist." Finn exhaled slowly. "So we name him?" "Temporarily, yes," she said. "We need something to put on the chart." Finn glanced at Cooper, who was now sitting up. "Call him River," he murmured. "After the station. That's where we found him." Dr. Price nodded. "River it is." As she walked away, a nurse wheeled by a small plastic bassinet with a pink blanket. Finn stood up quickly, but it wasn't River. Still, something tightened in his chest. An officer from the desk approached then, a short, wiry man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a voice that always sounded like he was chewing gravel. Sergeant Don Ridley had worked in Clearwater PD for over 2 decades. He was tough, blunt, and rarely impressed by anyone. Ridley had salt-and-pepper hair cut to a flat top, a thick mustache, and a habit of cracking his knuckles when irritated. "Parker," Ridley grunted, "you're making headlines already." Finn stood straighter. "Sir?" Radio chatters lit up. "Infant found in a suitcase." "Christ." Ridley handed over a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small square of flannel fabric, likely torn from the baby's blanket. Embroidered near the corner in worn pink thread were 2 letters. C.R. "Initials?" Finn asked. "Could be, or a brand from some boutique baby store. Either way, it's all you got to go on." Finn nodded. "No match in missing children?" Ridley shook his head. "Checked through NCIC and Amber Alerts. No reports for infants under 2 weeks in the state. Whoever dumped this baby didn't report him missing. Which tells you something, doesn't it?" "It tells me they weren't planning to come back," Finn said quietly. Ridley's mouth tightened. "Or they couldn't." Finn pocketed the evidence bag, then walked with Cooper toward the main lobby. The sun had finally cut through the fog outside, casting long shadows across the linoleum. Before reaching the doors, a woman at the front desk called out, "Officer Parker, someone left something for you." Finn turned as she handed over a plain manila envelope. It was unmarked. No return address. No stamps. It had been slid under the side door of the station before sunrise and delivered by internal mail. Finn opened it cautiously. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, creased and smudged. The note read in simple, shaky cursive, "I didn't want to do this. I'm not a bad person, but I had no choice. Please keep him safe. I'm sorry. No name, no explanation. Just guilt wrapped in sorrow." Finn read it twice, then passed it silently to Ridley. "See. Rains," Ridley offered. "Matches the initials on the fabric." "Maybe," Finn said, "but Rains isn't in our system. Could be first name. Could be fake." Just then, his radio crackled. "Unit 4, dispatch. We have a witness call. Elderly male, claims he saw a gray van stop near the transit station around 4:00 a.m. No plates. Parked near the alley for 5 minutes, then left fast." Finn keyed in. "Copy. I'll follow up." Ridley grunted. "You get a van with no license plate pulling up at dawn and leaving a newborn? That's not someone panicking. That's someone staging something." Finn nodded. "And trying not to be seen." Cooper gave a soft bark beside him. He was staring through the glass door toward the hospital driveway where a small boy and his mother passed by. Normal, ordinary. The contrast cut deep. Finn turned to Ridley. "We need to pull all traffic cams near the station and canvass the alley. Someone saw something." Ridley sighed. "You've been in this town 6 months. You really think Clearwater gives up secrets that easy?" Finn looked down at the plastic bag in his hand, then at Cooper, who remained still and alert. "I don't think secrets stay buried forever," he said, especially not with a dog like Cooper on the case. The morning light over Clearwater was cold and pale, slicing through the window blinds in narrow shafts that touched the dusty floor of Finn's living room. The fog from the previous day had lifted, but in its place came a brittle wind that rattled the windows and made the pine trees sway like old men murmuring secrets. Finn sat on the edge of his worn couch, the weight of a plain brown envelope in his hands. It had been wedged beneath his front door sometime before dawn. No return address, no markings, no sound of footsteps caught on his porch camera. Just this envelope, waiting in silence. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper, thin and crumpled, torn from a cheap notebook. Drawn in waxy crayon strokes were 4 uneven shapes: a figure that looked like a woman with long hair, another shape clearly representing a baby bundled in blue, a large, shaggy dog, and in the background a square wooden structure with smoke curling from the roof, perhaps meant to be a cabin. At the bottom, in shaky red letters, was a single word: safe. Finn stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned to Cooper, who stood quietly near the kitchen doorway, tail still, ears flicking. The moment Finn placed the crayon drawing on the floor, Cooper lowered his nose, sniffed it deeply, then gave a small, alert huff and trotted to the door. "You smell something?" Finn asked. Cooper barked once. It was the sharp bark of certainty. Finn grabbed his jacket and duty belt, slipped a flashlight into the loop, and followed the dog outside. Cooper led him not toward the station or the neighborhood alleys, but east, toward the tree line that edged the backside of Clearwater, where old logging trails threaded between dense fir and cedar. They crossed the cracked parking lot of an abandoned hardware store and disappeared into the woods. The hike was slow. The forest here was thick with undergrowth and blanketed with pine needles, muffling footsteps. Cooper moved ahead in steady arcs, nose down, ears swiveling. Finn followed, flashlight cutting through shafts of shadow, the smell of wet bark and rotting leaves thick in the air. After nearly an hour of winding paths, they came to a clearing, a shallow depression in the earth with a structure at its center. The cabin was barely more than a shack. Its roof was slanted tin, patched with tarps. One window was boarded with warped plywood, the other hung crooked on rusted hinges. Moss crawled up the siding like fingers gripping the walls, but there were signs of recent use. A weather-beaten diaper bag leaning against the door, a pile of baby wipes beside a mildewed plastic cooler, and a small, sagging clothesline strung between 2 trees, holding a single, tiny onesie, pale yellow and gently swaying. Finn's breath caught. He stepped forward, one hand on his sidearm, the other reaching slowly for the handle. He pushed the door open. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of formula, mildew, and desperation. A mattress lay on the floor in one corner, the blanket twisted and rumpled. Beside it, a plastic baby bottle, nearly empty. On the table was an open container of powdered formula, half a sleeve of saltines, and a bottle of ibuprofen with only 3 pills left. The floor creaked under Finn's boots. Pinned to the wall with a piece of medical tape was a photograph. It was grainy, slightly curled, but clear enough. A woman with long dark hair and tired eyes stood in a thrift store sundress, visibly pregnant. She looked into the camera not with a smile, but with something cautious, like she wasn't sure she would survive the moment after the shutter closed. Cooper whined softly and nosed the corner of the room. There, under a makeshift shelf made of milk crates, Finn found a stained spiral notebook. Inside were 3 pages of handwritten notes, all incomplete, all frantic. He's watching the door again. I need to leave tonight. If I don't come back, the cabin should last a few days. River will need formula. God, I hope he makes it. He's not safe with him. I thought I could fix it. I was wrong. Finn stepped back. His mind raced. This wasn't just a place someone had hidden. This was a last stand, a sanctuary someone had built while on the run. Later that day, Finn returned to Clearwater Hospital and asked for the one person who might recognize the woman in the photograph. Cassie Wells was a nurse at the Willow Creek Free Clinic, a converted mobile unit stationed 3 days a week at the edge of town. In her early 30s, Cassie had frizzy blonde hair always tied in a loose bun and wore oversized glasses that slipped down her nose when she leaned forward. Her scrubs were decorated with pastel cartoon animals, and she had a soft, almost sing-song voice that hid a surprisingly blunt way of speaking. Cassie took the photo and frowned. "Yeah, I know her. She came here twice, maybe 3 weeks apart. Never gave a full name. She called herself Camille." "Camille Raines?" Finn asked. "That sounds right. She didn't have ID, had bruises on her ribs and shoulder. Said she fell, but wouldn't look me in the eye. I tried to get her to speak with social services, but she freaked. Said someone was watching. She carried a notebook, kept asking about safe places for newborns. Did she ever mention a partner? A father?" Cassie hesitated. "Once. Said he wasn't the kind of man who should raise a child, that she thought he changed, but now she was scared. Why didn't you report it? She begged me not to. Said if anyone came looking, he'd find them both." Finn nodded, feeling the edges of a larger truth forming. "Did she mention the cabin?" "Only that she was building something. Said it wasn't pretty, but it would keep the cold out." Finn looked back down at the photo in his hand. Cassie leaned forward. "Is she dead?" "I don't know," Finn said honestly, "but I think she left that baby hoping someone like Cooper would find him." The clouds hung low over Clearwater that afternoon, turning the world a soft, dull gray. A breeze whispered through the trees, cold and unsettled. In the police station's break room, Finn sat hunched over a cracked screen phone, cheap, battered, the kind of burner someone would use to disappear. He'd retrieved it from the cabin earlier that morning. Only one ping remained, a faint, desperate signal sent out 3 days ago, deep in the Raven Pines woods. He was about to leave when dispatch buzzed through his radio. "Unit 4, be advised. We've had a call come in from a local, William Travis. Says he was fishing near Raven Pines. Claims he heard a baby crying and a woman screaming. Didn't get close. Said it sounded bad." Finn pressed his thumb to the mic. 10-4. I'll follow up." William Bill Travis was a 67-year-old loner who lived in a trailer on the far west edge of town. Former logger, now retired, skin like leather, and a voice that sounded like he'd gargled nails. Locals knew him for 3 things: trespassing on private land to fish illegally, living off canned beans and vodka, and claiming "not my problem" as a life philosophy. Bill met Finn outside his trailer, wearing a patched flannel jacket and rubber boots, gnawing the stub of an unlit cigar. "I don't want trouble," he began, eyes squinting. "Didn't see nothing, but I heard something. Near that old cabin, Franklin's place, back behind the South Ridge." "What did you hear?" Finn asked. Bill scratched his chin. "A woman, screaming. Then it stopped. Then crying. A baby, maybe. I didn't go closer." "Why not?" "Because I'm old, kid. And I've lived long enough to know when something ain't right." Finn gave a nod, already turning back to the cruiser. Cooper, seated in the passenger seat, perked up the moment Finn slid behind the wheel. The shepherd had been unusually alert all day, as though he too sensed that time was running thin. As they drove toward Raven Pines, Cooper's body tensed. The scent on the wind had changed, faint but familiar. He began to whine low in his throat. About 5 miles down the logging road, Finn pulled over at a break in the trees. The forest here was dense and quiet, the sky barely visible through the thick canopy. "Track," Finn said simply. Cooper took off, nose to the earth. His path curved sharply to the right, toward a narrow foot trail thick with pine needles. Finn followed. The silence grew heavier the deeper they went. No bird song, no branches cracking, just wind and heartbeat. Then Cooper stopped, sniffed a tree trunk, and gave a single growl. Finn crouched. There, smeared on the rough bark, was a rusty streak of blood. Dried. At least a day old. On the ground nearby, a piece of torn fabric, gray and stained. Finn bagged it, then followed Cooper's lead once more. As they climbed a small rise, the trees parted just enough to reveal a roofline, a sagging wooden cabin barely upright beneath the press of time and rot. Smoke curled lazily from the rusted chimney. Cooper crouched low, ears high. Then they heard it. A shout, sharp, female, cut off by a loud crash, then crying. Not a baby, a woman. Finn drew his weapon and approached the cabin's back door. It was cracked open. Inside, the stench hit him first, mold, sweat, something burnt. He entered quietly. The living room was a mess. Torn couch cushions, beer cans, an overturned chair. A baby bottle lay empty on the floor beside a dirty diaper. The walls were yellowed from smoke, windows nailed shut. Then, a muffled sob from the hallway. Finn moved fast, stepping toward the only closed door. He counted silently. 1. 2. He kicked it open. Inside, a woman was on the ground, shielding her face. Standing over her was a man, mid-30s, broad, sleeves rolled up, fists clenched. His eyes were wild, jaw rigid. Before he could speak, Cooper lunged. The shepherd slammed into the man's torso, knocking him to the ground. His teeth locked around the man's wrist, just enough pressure to keep him down but not tear. The man shouted in pain. Finn crossed the room in 2 strides and cuffed him. The woman sat up slowly, panting, blood on her lip and bruises on both arms. Her long black hair was matted, her clothes torn and oversized. She looked up at Finn, dazed but conscious. "You Camille Raines?" he asked. She nodded. "You're safe now," he said, kneeling beside her. She looked at Cooper, whose body now shielded her from her attacker, and her face crumpled. "You found him, didn't you?" Finn nodded. "He's safe. He's at Clearwater Regional. We've been calling him River." Tears spilled silently down her face. The man on the floor growled. "She's lying." "That kid is." Finn didn't let him finish. "Shut up. You're done talking." Outside, the rain finally started to fall. Slow. Relentless. But inside the cabin, the silence was deeper. A silence not of fear, but of something breaking open. The rain had settled into a quiet drizzle as officers moved through the cabin like ghosts, collecting evidence under the dim light of battery-powered lanterns. Outside, the patrol cars cast long, flickering reflections across the wet ground. The tension from earlier had lifted, but what remained was no less heavy, a room still humming with the residue of violence, fear, and a long history of silence. Finn stood near a half-collapsed dresser, sifting through drawers warped from moisture. Cooper sat quietly behind him, body coiled but calm, still watching the front door with instinctive vigilance. On a shelf above the dresser, beneath an old flannel shirt, Finn found something that didn't belong, a small leather-bound notebook. Worn at the corners, edges dark with oil from being thumbed through too many times. He opened it slowly. Inside were names, dozens of them. Women's names, each followed by quick clinical notes in sharp block lettering. Obedient. Unstable. Pregnant. Gone. Some had dates. A few had dollar amounts scribbled beside them. One was underlined twice. Camille, refused exit plan, hiding with child. Finn's stomach tightened. He flipped further. More names, several marked with dealt with. Others simply crossed out in red pen. "Finn," came the voice of Officer Ray Alvarez from the doorway, his partner for the night's call-out. Ray, with his weather-worn jacket and quiet, observant manner, had a knack for spotting the subtle things most missed. Ray stepped in, holding a folded paper in a plastic evidence bag. "Found this in his inside pocket." He handed it to Finn. It was a document printed on cheap legal stationery. The header looked official, but the font was inconsistent, and the notary seal had pixelation, likely copied from a scan. "Custody Transfer Agreement," it read, supposedly signed by Camille Raines. Beneath it, in a trembling, uneven signature, was her name, except it wasn't hers. "It's fake," Ray said quietly. "And based on how much paper like this costs to forge, He's done it before. Finn stared at the paper, jaw locked. He wasn't just violent. He was building something. A system. Taking children through fear and forged paperwork. He turned as Camille coughed from the corner of the room. She was seated on a frayed cushion, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, face pale and still streaked with blood. Her eyes looked older than they had hours ago. But there was clarity now, painful, clear-eyed strength. "You said he's done it before?" Finn asked gently. Camille nodded. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I heard him once. Drunk, talking on the phone. He laughed, said I was another one for the book. I didn't know what he meant then. But later, when I saw the drawer with all those names, I knew I wouldn't survive long enough to testify. I had to disappear. Why not run sooner? I tried, twice." She looked down at her scraped hands. "He followed me every time, tracked me through friends, told me if I ever went to the police they'd believe him. He showed me those custody papers. I thought they were real. I thought if I ran with River, I'd lose him for good." Her voice cracked. "So I did the only thing I could. I left him where someone kind would find him." Finn didn't speak. He only nodded once and stood up. Then gently he offered his hand. "We're taking you to him." The ambulance ride was slow, careful. Camille lay on the stretcher, her breathing thin and shallow from shock and fatigue. The paramedics administered fluids, but all she asked, repeating in a broken whisper, was, "Is he warm? Is he safe?" Finnan sat beside her at the back while Cooper lay on the floor of the ambulance, his head resting against the stretcher leg, unmoving but present, like a guardian statue that breathed. At Clearwater Regional Hospital, Nurse Rachel Montrose waited. A familiar face in the chaos, Rachel was a woman in her late 50s with warm, earth-toned scrubs and a voice like flannel. She'd been with the NICU for decades and had seen heartbreak in many forms, but something about River had stuck with her from the moment he was brought in. She believed, perhaps foolishly, that he had been left not to die, but to be saved. As Camille was wheeled through the sliding ER doors, Rachel approached with a quiet nod and rested a hand on her shoulder. "He's here," she said simply. Camille was taken to room 103, small, warm, and dimly lit. The baby lay swaddled in a hospital-issued blanket, a soft bear placed beside him. His skin had taken on a healthy glow after several days of care. His breaths were slow, even. His fists clenched softly at his sides. When Camille saw him, her breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth. Then she reached forward, fingers shaking, and placed her palm on his chest. His warmth against her skin was the first real proof she'd had that she hadn't lost him forever. She began to cry, not in wails, not in sobs, but in that quiet, fractured way a heart breaks open when it's been clenched too long. River stirred. His lips parted. And without opening his eyes, he let out a tiny sigh. Finn stood silently in the hallway, Cooper at his side watching through the glass. "She's got him back," Rachel said softly. "She never should have had to lose him in the first place," Finn murmured. Cooper's tail thumped once against the linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights of Clearwater Regional Hospital buzzed faintly above room 103, where the scent of antiseptic clung to the curtains and hope hovered like a fragile flame. The room was quiet, save for the occasional beeping of River's heart monitor and the low hum of the heating vent blowing warm air against the chill of the late October morning. Outside, the rain had turned into mist, casting the streets of the small mountain town in a damp, ethereal gray. Camille lay curled in the hospital bed, thin and pale beneath the blankets. Her eyes, sunken from exhaustion and trauma, remained locked on the bassinet beside her where River slept. She hadn't moved much since being brought in, except to touch his hand every few minutes as if to reassure herself he was truly there. Dr. Leona Harris, a woman in her early 60s with deep brown skin, short silver curls, and a stern yet maternal demeanor, stood by the foot of the bed reviewing her chart. Leona had worked trauma cases for over 3 decades, and had developed a quiet mastery of listening to what patients didn't say. Her voice was calm and clinical, but her eyes softened as she looked at Camille. "She's stable," she said to Finn, who stood just inside the door with Cooper sitting silently beside him. "But the psychological impact, it's going to take longer. She's severely dehydrated, signs of malnourishment, and we'll need to monitor her for post-traumatic stress." Finn nodded slowly, watching Camille's fingers trace circles on the edge of the blanket. "She hasn't said much," he said, "but when she saw River, she whispered, 'He's alive.' That was the first thing, like she couldn't believe it herself." Dr. Harris closed the chart. "It'll come in pieces. Let her control the pace." As she left, Camille finally spoke. Her voice was gravel, but clear. "I thought I'd never see him again." Her eyes flicked up to Finn. "I thought I'd killed him. That by putting him in that suitcase, I was signing his death." Finn took a step closer, careful not to make her feel crowded. "You saved him. You got him out. You gave him a chance. And that chance led him here." Camille's lips trembled, but no sound came. She looked back at River. "He looks just like my father. He never got to meet him. Would you feel up to telling me what happened? What got you here?" Camille took a slow breath, her voice gaining shape as she spoke. "Martin kept me in a cabin. I met him during a bad time. I had no family left. My mom died in a car accident 2 years ago. I thought he was helping me. I thought he loved me. But when I got pregnant, something changed in him. He said I owed him everything now." Her hand clenched the blanket. "I wasn't allowed to call anyone. No internet. No friends. Just chores, silence, and him. When I tried to leave, he broke my phone. Said if I left again, he'd take the baby and I'd never see him. That's when I started planning. Quietly, slowly. I packed River in the suitcase, wrapped him up warm, waited until Martin passed out drunk. I knew the trains passed through Clearwater. I thought, maybe someone would find him there." Tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "And then he found me again. I didn't think I'd live another day." Finn sat on the chair beside her, posture slightly slouched but eyes steady. "You're safe now, and he's in custody. We've already sent his information to the state. There's a strong case against him." Camille glanced at River. "I don't even know what happens next. What if the system takes him away from me?" "You're his mother," Finn said gently. "You protected him the best way you could. You're not a criminal. You're a survivor." Camille leaned back into the pillows. "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." "Then let the rest of us carry you until you feel whole again." Outside the door, Officer Ray entered with a soft knock. "Finn, I need a word." Finn rose and joined him in the hallway. Ray handed him a document from Child Services. "They're fast-tracking emergency guardianship. But Camille won't be able to keep the baby in her room until she's medically cleared. They're asking for a temporary placement." Finn looked at the paper, then at the glass window where River slept beside Camille. "He's been through too much to be placed with strangers." Ray raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering?" Finn hesitated. "Yeah, I'll take him, just until she's cleared." "You sure? It's a lot of responsibility." Finn gave a tired smile. "He was my responsibility the second Cooper found that suitcase." By late afternoon, Nurse Rachel Montrose wheeled in a small cart of supplies, diapers, formula, hospital-issued swaddles. Her tone was brisk but kind, the way only longtime nurses knew how to balance care and efficiency. "I put in a word with the board," Rachel said. "Said you're the officer who found him and the only one the baby seems calm around. They approved your emergency request." Rachel turned to Camille. "He'll be with Officer Finn tonight. You need to rest. Let your body heal." Camille nodded. She looked to Finn and whispered, "Thank you." Finn didn't answer, just gave her a quiet nod and took the infant car seat in both hands. River stirred in his sleep, blinking slowly as the cool air kissed his cheeks. Cooper padded beside them down the hallway, his gait smooth, tail low but wagging slightly. The dog had formed a strange connection to the baby, never too close, never too far, watching, guarding. Finn strapped the baby seat into the back of his cruiser and glanced into the rearview mirror. "Guess it's just you, me, and Cooper tonight, little man." The rain had stopped and the clouds began to part. A sliver of light cut through the fog, pale gold and hesitant, but there. Hope didn't come in floods, it came in whispers, and tonight it rode in the backseat of a patrol car with a sleepy child, a tired officer, and a dog who never stopped believing. The courtroom in Clearwater's modest courthouse had never held so much collective breath. Wood-paneled walls, worn benches, and the faint scent of dust and lemon oil set the backdrop for a reckoning years overdue. The town had seen its share of petty crimes and domestic disputes, but nothing like this. Not the public trial of a man accused of systematic abuse, forgery, and the abduction of women under threats and lies. Not the trial of Martin Hollis. He sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his salt-and-pepper beard trimmed neatly, the orange prison uniform doing little to soften the cold, reptilian composure he wore like armor, but his hands, trembling slightly as the charges were read, betrayed him. Kidnapping, assault, attempted custody fraud, criminal impersonation, and, worst of all, endangering the welfare of a minor. Finn sat 3 rows back, dressed in his clean Navy patrol uniform. On his lap, River, now officially named Miles Parker, slept curled against his chest, wrapped in a soft blue blanket that Camille had hand-stitched during her recovery. The baby's breaths were deep, even, and brought an odd steadiness to Finn's pulse. Cooper lay on the floor beside him, head resting on his paws, ears flicking subtly at each change in the judge's tone. Camille took the stand mid-morning. Now, healthier, though still pale, her hair tied back, she wore a soft gray sweater and jeans. Her voice did not shake. She told the truth in quiet sentences, measured and unwavering. The room was still as her story unfolded, how Martin isolated her, manipulated her, threatened her and their child. The night she fled. The suitcase. Her hope, more desperate than certain, that someone kind would find the baby before the cold did. When the defense tried to question her integrity, suggesting instability, the prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Darlene Holt with a precise voice and no patience for intimidation, rose like a blade. "And yet," Darlene said, "despite every threat, every terror, every physical and psychological chain placed upon her, Miss Raines still managed to save her son. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not instability. That is courage." By noon, the jury delivered their decision. Guilty on all counts. Judge Kenneth Boyle, a rotund man with a kind face weathered by decades on the bench, delivered the sentence. 25 years without parole. His gavel fell like thunder. Martin's jaw twitched, his eyes darting toward Camille, but her gaze did not meet his. It was fixed on the sleeping child in Finn's arms. Outside the courthouse, the autumn wind stirred the banners lining Main Street. The town of Clearwater had come out in quiet solidarity, standing by the steps, not shouting, not cheering, but watching. Watching justice unfold in their name, on behalf of one woman and one child and a dog. That evening, the city square became a stage of joy instead of tension. The mayor, a sprightly woman named Beverly Cross with short silver hair and a commanding yet cheerful air, stood at the front of a small raised platform beneath the gazebo wrapped in twinkling string lights. "Tonight," she announced, "we don't just honor an officer. We honor a soul with pause and purpose. Cooper, Clearwater's very own hero, didn't just sniff out danger. He guarded life. He refused to leave a crying baby. He took down a monster. And tonight, we name him our official K-9 Hero of the Year." The crowd applauded, not raucously, but with reverence. Finn, still in uniform, approached the stage holding Miles, now alert and gurgling softly, while Cooper, wearing a freshly brushed coat and a new badge-shaped tag on his collar, stood proudly at his side. Mayor Beverly reached into a small velvet box and lifted a miniature collar, tiny, made of soft leather with a silver charm in the shape of Cooper's paw. "This," she said, "is for Miles, because the best heroes leave their mark not in battles, but in lives." Finn knelt down and gently placed the collar in Miles's lap. The baby cooed and kicked, his tiny fingers wrapping around the charm. From the crowd, Camille, leaning on the arm of Nurse Rachel, who'd become something of a protective aunt, smiled through tears. Later that night, after the applause had faded and the candles were snuffed out, Finn sat alone on his porch. Cooper curled beside him, tired but content. Miles lay inside, asleep in a new crib donated by the local fire station. Camille had chosen to stay at the hospital for one more night, wanting to breathe one last day of sterile peace before stepping fully into the world again. As Finn looked out into the night, stars clear above the hills, he thought of everything that had led here. A suitcase, a cry in the fog, a choice made without hesitation. Not all families are born. Some are found in silence, in pain, in faith, in the steady thump of a dog's tail and the heartbeat of a child against your chest. And some justice doesn't speak. It just holds on and never lets go. The first snow blanketed Clearwater with a hush that seemed almost sacred. The rooftops, the trees, the winding trail behind Finn's house, all dusted in white, glowing beneath the morning sun. At the edge of a town, nestled between the whispering woods and a winding creek, stood a small cottage with worn shutters, flower boxes, and a hand-carved sign by the porch that simply read, "Welcome Home." Inside, the scent of cinnamon toast drifted through the kitchen, where Camille stood barefoot in thick socks and Finn's oversized flannel shirt. Her long hair was tied in a loose braid that fell over her shoulder, and her cheeks were slightly flushed from sleep. She moved slower these days, not because of fear, but because there was no longer a need to run. Miles lay in a soft baby lounger near the fireplace, wrapped in a pale green blanket stitched with forest animals. His tiny fists pumped the air in slow motion, eyes darting between the crackling flames and the golden blur of Cooper, who sat beside him like a sentry carved from oak. Camille turned when she heard it. "Pooh, pooh," came the sound, small, breathy, and unmistakable. Finn, who was putting another log on the fire, froze mid-motion. Cooper perked up too, tilting his head. Camille's hand covered her mouth. Did he just... "Puppy," Finn whispered, kneeling beside the lounger. Miles gurgled, grinning, his drool catching the light as he reached out for Cooper's ear. The dog leaned in gently, letting the baby grab hold, and rested his chin across the child's legs. Tears welled in Camille's eyes, not from sadness, but from a strange, full happiness she hadn't believed she'd feel again. For the first time, she didn't feel like a visitor in her own life. That night, after Camille had sung Miles to sleep with an old lullaby she remembered from her childhood, she stepped out to the porch. Snow fell gently around her. Finn followed a moment later, wrapping a wool blanket around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft. She nodded. "I'm just remembering who I was before him, before everything." Finn didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, their shoulders touching, the quiet between them saying more than words could manage. Cooper wandered out, sat on the top step, and let the snow settle on his back. His ears twitched at every sound, but he didn't move from his post. Camille looked toward the stars. "Do you think he knows," she asked suddenly, "how much he changed everything?" "I think he's always known," Finn said. "That's what makes him who he is." A few days later, the town held a quiet gathering at the community center, not an award ceremony, just a winter potluck and a welcome for Camille. Neighbors brought apple pies, crocheted baby hats, and one elderly man named Mr. Harlan who rarely spoke to anyone. handed Camille a tiny wooden rocking horse he said he'd made for the boy with the lion dog. People didn't ask about her past. They asked about her plans. Camille, though still healing, began volunteering at the town's new literacy program, helping young mothers with reading and paperwork. It was small, humble work, but it mattered. Meanwhile, Finn adjusted his hours at the precinct. He'd become the kind of man the town trusted not only as a cop, but as someone who truly listened. And at home, he was learning how to braid baby blankets, how to cook oatmeal without burning it, and how to hold a child at just the right angle when teething got bad. As for Cooper, retirement suited him. He no longer chased criminals, but he chased squirrels, mailmen, and sometimes Miles crawling too close to the stairs. He lay curled beside the crib at night, tail thudding softly when Camille whispered good night. He became more than a protector. He became a witness to something precious blooming from what was once fear. In the living room, over the mantel, hung a photograph. Camille holding Miles, Finn beside them, and Cooper in front, sitting tall, tongue-lolling in what could only be described as a grin. Beneath the frame, a small engraved plate simply read, "Our beginning." No medals, no speeches, just life. Messy, beautiful, earned, and in the quiet moments during a snowfall, a shared laugh or a soft breath against Cooper's fur, they all knew. This wasn't just survival. This was home. We don't choose where our story begins. But we do get to choose who walks beside us as it continues. For one baby boy named Miles and a dog named Cooper, the journey didn't start with comfort. It started with silence, fear, and a suitcase left in the cold. But from that silence rose a bond strong enough to heal bruises you can't see, to bring light to places no one looked, and to teach a town that family isn't always about blood, it's about choosing love, again and again. Cooper wasn't just a dog, he was a memory keeper, a guardian of laughter, of midnight cries, of first steps and first words. He brought strangers together and reminded them that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful homes. Maybe there's a Cooper in your life. Maybe you're someone's Cooper without even knowing it. If this story moved you, take a moment, like, share, and leave us a comment. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next journey. And may God bless you and those you walk beside. Always.